It was exactly 12 seconds past midnight when the silent alert pulsed on his phone. The private elevator was locked. The floor was supposed to be a fortress of solitude. It wasn't. There she was, Maya, a woman in a neon-striped vest who had no business being 50 stories above the city. A woman who looked like a splash of color in a world of cold marble and steel. She was standing in front of the only door in the city that no one was ever invited to knock on. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was standing there with a thermal bag clutched to her chest, her head tilted as she checked a crumpled receipt. Her breath was hitching, not with the fear of a trespasser, but with the exhaustion of someone who had been climbing stairs for a world that never paid them enough. He was watching. Kang Jae-hyun, the shadow at the center of a 100-year syndicate, a man who treated the city like a circuit board he had personally wired. He lived behind the highest walls in Los Angeles, where every sensor and lens was an extension of his own eyes. He saw the movement of money before it was spent. He knew the secrets of men before they whispered them. That was the logic of his survival, a perfect system that kept the world at a precise, lethal distance. It had never been breached, until the moment the infrared sensor on his private threshold flickered to life. He had been sitting in his office for 3 hours, the lights dimmed, surrounded by the hum of servers and the weight of a decision he didn't want to make. He told himself he was staying late to review the shipping manifests. But when the screen on his desk flared white, showing a girl with a delivery backpack standing where a hitman should have been, Jae-hyun realized he was looking at a variable he couldn't calculate. The silence of the penthouse was not an accident. It was a product. Kang Jae-hyun paid a staggering amount of money to ensure that the screams of the city never reached his ears. Here, high above the smog, the only sounds were the soft hum of the climate control and the rhythmic ticking of a clock that cost more than a luxury sedan. In this world, there was one absolute law, the zero-entry rule. No one crossed the threshold of his private residence. Not his lieutenants, not his legal counsel, and certainly not his family. To the people in the streets below, Jae-hyun was a ghost, a name whispered in backrooms, a shadow that moved the market, but never a face you could touch. His home was the inner sanctum of that ghost. He stood up from his desk. His movements were fluid, like a predator that had never known the fear of being hunted. He didn't call out to his security team over the intercom. He didn't reach for the handgun hidden beneath the mahogany surface of his desk. Instead, he walked toward the heavy, soundproof doors. In the hallway, the 2 guards shifted. They were men built like concrete blocks, trained to neutralize threats before a word was ever spoken. When they heard the internal lock click, their posture broke for a fraction of a second. It was a rare flicker of genuine shock. The boss did not open his own doors. Jae-hyun pulled the door open. The air from the hallway was different, sharper, carrying the faint, metallic scent of the elevator cables and the residual heat of the city. Maya Carter did not look like a threat. She looked like a mistake. She was leaning back slightly, one hand resting on the strap of her heavy backpack. Her neon vest was a jagged contrast to the muted, expensive shadows of Jae-hyun's foyer. She held the thermal bag out like a shield. For 3 seconds, no one spoke. The guards stepped forward, their hands moving toward their waistbands, their eyes fixed on Maya with a cold, professional intent. They were waiting for the signal to make her disappear. Jae-hyun didn't give it. He didn't look at his men. He looked at Maya. He noticed the way her fingers gripped the thermal bag until her knuckles turned a lighter shade. He saw the small, quick pulse in the side of her neck. She was terrified, but she wasn't moving. "You're late," Jae-hyun said. His voice was low, a smooth baritone that seemed to vibrate in the narrow space. It wasn't an accusation. It was a test. Maya swallowed. She looked at the 2 massive men flanking the door, then back at the man in the sharp black suit who held the power of a king. "The elevator requires a key card," Maya said, her voice thin but remarkably steady. "I had to take the stairs. 50 flights. She had climbed 50 flights of stairs to deliver a bag of lukewarm food to a ghost. Jae-hyun felt a strange, unfamiliar pressure in his chest. It wasn't logic. It was curiosity. He reached out and placed a hand on the edge of the door, blocking his guard's path to her. "Let her in," he said. The guards froze. The rule had been broken. The system had crashed. And for the first time in his life, Kang Jae-hyun wanted to see what happened next. Maya stepped into the foyer, and the heavy doors clicked shut behind her. The sound was final, like a lid closing on a box. She was now inside the one place in the city that didn't exist on any map. The two guards didn't move back. They stood like pillars of shadow, their eyes never leaving her. To them, she was a bug that had flown into a spider's web. But Maya didn't look at the guards. She kept her eyes on Jae-hyun. He was standing too close. He didn't smell like a typical customer. He smelled of expensive soap and the cold, ozone scent of a room that was too clean. He didn't offer to take the bag. He simply waited, his face a mask of calm curiosity. He was waiting for her to break, for the apology to spill out, for her to realize that a delivery driver didn't belong in the presence of a man who owned the air she was breathing. Maya felt the heat in her face, the kind that came from climbing 50 flights, but her hands had stopped shaking. She looked at the marble floor, then directly into his dark, level eyes. "That'll be $42.60, she said. The silence that followed was heavy. One of the guards shifted, his leather holster creaking, a small sound that felt like a gunshot in the quiet room. Jae-hyun didn't move. A tiny muscle in his jaw flinched. He had spent his entire life watching people crumble. He had seen billionaires stammer and rivals plead. He expected her to realize her mistake and run for the elevator. Instead, she was holding out a thermal bag and asking for the change. "You realize where you are," Jae-hyun said. It wasn't a question. "I realize I'm at the wrong address," Maya replied, her voice gaining a sharp, dry edge. "But I also realize I spent 40 minutes getting up here because your security gates are a nightmare. The food is still warm. The price is on the receipt." Jae-hyun looked down at the crumpled paper tucked into the bag's side pocket. For the first time in years, the system, in his head, didn't have a pre-written response. He found himself noticing the small details, the way she shifted her weight to soothe her tired legs, and the fact that she hadn't looked at his guards once. She didn't care about the lions, she cared about the work. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a slim, black leather clip. He didn't count the bills. He pulled out a $100 note and held it out between two fingers. Maya didn't take it immediately. She looked at the bill, then at him. "I don't have change for 100, she said. "Keep it," Jae-hyun murmured. "I'm not looking for a tip," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a shout. "I'm looking for the total." Jae-hyun paused. He saw the pride behind her tired eyes, a stubborn spark that his money couldn't reach. It was the first time someone had refused his terms in this house. He looked at the guard on his left. "Find $42, Jae-hyun ordered. "Exactly." As the guard scrambled to find the cash, Jae-hyun realized his curiosity had turned into something else. He wasn't just watching a mistake anymore. He was watching a challenge. The guard handed over two $20 bills and 3 ones. Maya tucked the money into her pocket, zipped it shut, and adjusted the strap of her backpack. She didn't look for the exit. She waited for him to move, knowing that in this house, the air only moved when he allowed it. Jae-hyun gestured toward the guards. "Wait by the elevator," he said. The men hesitated. Their job was to ensure that no one who saw the boss's face left without a thorough vetting. But Jae-hyun didn't repeat himself. He didn't have to. They bowed their heads and retreated, the heavy silence of the foyer returning as they stepped out of earshot. Jae-hyun leaned against the dark wood of the doorframe. He was analyzing her as if she were a line of code in a broken program. "How did you get past the lobby?" he asked. "The biometric scanner doesn't respond to delivery codes after 10. Maya didn't look away. The service entrance door didn't latch, she said simply. I saw the light, I pulled, and it opened. I thought it was my lucky night. I was wrong. It was a small detail, a mechanical failure in a $1 million security system. To Jae-hyun, it was a reminder that even the most expensive walls had cracks. He watched her carefully. She wasn't looking at the art on the walls or the gold leafing on the ceiling. She was looking at the digital clock on the wall, watching the seconds bleed away. You aren't asking who I am, Jae-hyun observed. I know who you are, Maya said. I've seen your face on the news. You're the man who bought the docks last year. The one people are afraid to name. Jae-hyun felt a cold pull in his chest. His anonymity was his greatest weapon. If she knew his face and his reputation, his zero-entry rule demanded a very specific, very permanent solution. Protocol dictated that she could not leave with that information. And yet, Jae-hyun murmured, you're still standing here demanding $42. Most people would have dropped the bag and ran the moment the door opened. Running makes people think you're guilty, she replied. And $42 is a utility bill. I don't have the luxury of being afraid of you, Mr. Kong. I have to work. Jae-hyun looked at the backpack, seeing the wear on the fabric and the scuffs on her shoes. He was looking for a reason to classify her as a threat, but all he found was a person who was simply trying to survive. The door stayed open because of a broken latch, he said to himself, his voice barely a whisper. He made a decision, a small shift in his ironclad logic. If I let you walk out that door, Maya Carter, you become a ghost again. You saw nothing. You delivered to a different floor. Do you understand? I've already forgotten what color your tie is, she said. The tension in the room shifted. It wasn't gone, but it had changed shape. Jae-hyun reached for the door handle, but before he could turn it, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He didn't need to look at it to know the pressure was coming. The night was no longer just about a delivery. Jae-hyun didn't look at his phone screen. He didn't have to. The specific vibration pattern, 3 short pulses, told him everything he needed to know. It was the feed from the lobby. He glanced at the small monitor embedded in the wall near the door. The elevator display showed a single car rising. It was moving fast, bypassing every floor until it reached the 50th. Below the numbers, a small video window showed the man inside the car. It was Min-ho. Jae-hyun's youngest lieutenant was leaning against the back wall of the elevator, a cigarette unlit between his lips. Min-ho was a man who lived for the cracks in the armor. He didn't just want power. He wanted to prove that Jae-hyun's precision was actually a weakness. On the screen, Min-ho looked up at the camera and smiled. He had seen Maya on the lobby feed. He knew a stranger was in the boss's sanctuary. Change of plans, Jae-hyun said. His voice was no longer curious. It was like iron. Maya noticed the shift. She looked at the monitor, then back at Jae-hyun. She saw the way his hand tightened on the door handle. Is that a problem? She asked, gesturing toward the screen. That is a shark, Jae-hyun said. And he is coming up here to see if I still have teeth. If Min-ho found a civilian in this foyer, the night wouldn't end with a $42 payment. It would end with Min-ho demanding a demonstration of loyalty to the no-witness protocol. He would force Jae-hyun to choose between his reputation and Maya's life. Jae-hyun stepped back, deeper into the shadows of the apartment. He didn't open the door to the hallway. Instead, he pointed toward a heavy curtain that shielded the floor-to-ceiling windows of his dining room. Get behind that, he commanded. Maya didn't move immediately. I'm not part of your games, she whispered. I delivered the food. Let me out the back. There is no back, Jae-hyun said, his eyes fixed on the elevator numbers. 45, 46. If he sees you, I can't protect the ghost you want to be. Move. Now. Maya saw the look in his eyes, not the look of a boss, but of a man who was suddenly calculating the cost of a life. She moved. She stepped behind the thick, velvet fabric just as the elevator chimed at the end of the hall. Jae-hyun took a deep breath. He smoothed the front of his suit jacket and stepped into the center of the foyer. He stood alone, the thermal bag still sitting on the marble floor like a forgotten piece of evidence. The front doors didn't open. Instead, the private elevator doors slid back, and Minho stepped out. He didn't wait for an invitation. He walked into the foyer, his eyes scanning the room like a vulture. He stopped when he saw the delivery bag. "Smells like cheap grease, boss," Minho said, his voice dripping with false respect. "I didn't know you had a taste for the street." Jae-hyun didn't blink. He watched Minho's eyes dart toward the curtain where Maya was hiding. The trap was set, and the air in the room became so thin it felt like it might snap. Minho lingered for a few more minutes, his eyes tracing the line of the heavy velvet curtains. He laughed softly, a sound that lacked any warmth, before finally retreating into the elevator. Jae-hyun didn't move until the digital display showed the car was back on the ground floor. He pulled the curtain back. Maya was standing exactly where he had left her. She wasn't trembling. Instead, her mouth was set in a firm, flat line. "He's gone," Jae-hyun said, his voice returning to its usual distant calm. "I'll have my men escort you out through the service basement once the cameras are looped. You'll be safe." He expected her to thank him. He expected her to hurry toward the exit. But Maya stayed still, her backpack still slung over her shoulder. "Is that what you call this?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the empty dining room. "Safety." Jae-hyun frowned. "I just saved your life. Minho doesn't leave witnesses. My systems protect me, and tonight they protected you." Maya stepped out from behind the curtain. She looked around the room, at the cold marble, the silent monitors, and the vast, empty space. "I've spent the last 20 minutes listening to your heart beat through a piece of velvet," she said. "You aren't protecting a life, Mr. Kong. This place, it doesn't even feel real." Jae-hyun didn't respond. He wasn't used to being analyzed. "You have all these cameras and all these rules," Maya continued, her eyes locking onto his. "But you're the only person I've met all night who seems trapped. You're terrified of a broken door latch. You're terrified of a man who works for you. This isn't power. It's a lonely man's hobby." The air in the room grew heavy. Jae-hyun felt a flicker of something sharp, not anger, but a realization that she was seeing past the suit and the name. He looked at the bank of monitors showing the empty hallways and the silent streets below. "I have built an empire," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "No," Maya said, shaking her head. "You've built a high-tech cage. You sit up here at midnight watching people move because you're too afraid to move with them. You think you're a ghost because you're important, but maybe you're a ghost because you've forgotten how to be real." She didn't wait for his permission this time. She walked back toward the foyer and picked up her thermal bag, which was now empty and light. Jae-hyun watched her. He noticed for the first time how small she looked against the massive, expensive walls of his home. And yet, she was the only thing in the room that had any heat. He realized he didn't want her to leave yet, not because of the protocol, but because the silence of the penthouse suddenly felt much louder than it had 10 minutes ago. The chime of the private elevator cut through the air before Jae-hyun could respond to Maya's words. The doors didn't just open, they slid back with a heavy mechanical finality. Minho hadn't gone back to the ground floor. He had simply looped the car and come back up, and this time he wasn't alone. Two men stood behind the lieutenant, their faces as expressionless as stone. Minho walked into the room, his eyes landing instantly on Maya, who was standing by the foyer with her bag. He didn't look surprised. He looked satisfied. "I knew the smell of grease didn't come from a ghost, boss," Minho said. He walked a slow circle around Maya, sniffing the air as if he were tracking prey. "A delivery girl. 50 floors up. In the sanctuary." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The guards by the door straightened their backs, their eyes darting between Jae-hyun and Minho. The loyalty in the room was shifting, pulling toward the man who was currently quoting the law. "She's leaving," Jae-hyun said. His voice was flat, lacking any hint of the internal storm Maya had just started. Is she? Minho stopped inches from Maya. He reached out a hand to touch the strap of her backpack, but she stepped back, her eyes hard and unafraid. Minho smiled, showing teeth. Section 4 of the internal protocol is very clear, Jae-hyun. No outsiders. No witnesses. Especially not ones who know your face and your floor. Minho turned to look at the guards. The protocol isn't a suggestion. It's what keeps us alive. If the boss is too tired to follow the rules we all live by, then maybe the boss is the problem. The challenge was out in the open now. It wasn't about a delivery anymore. It was a public test of Jae-hyun's strength. Minho was holding a silent mirror up to the room, asking the guards if they wanted a leader who was real, or a leader who followed the system. Maya didn't beg. She didn't look at Minho at all. She looked at Jae-hyun. She was watching to see if the man she called a ghost would finally act like a person, or if he would hide behind his walls and let the shark have his way. She hasn't seen anything that matters, Jae-hyun said, but even he could hear the hollow ring in the excuse. She's seen you, Minho countered. He pulled a small, silver handgun from his waistband and held it out, grip first, toward Jae-hyun. Prove the system still works. Handle the witness, or I'll have to report to the council that you've gone soft. The room became an ice box. Every eye was on Jae-hyun's hand. The decision was no longer about safety or logic. It was about whether he was willing to kill the only truth that had entered his home in 10 years. Jae-hyun looked at the gun, then at Maya's steady gaze. He reached out and took the weapon. The weight of the silver handgun was cold and familiar in Jae-hyun's palm. He looked down at the weapon, his thumb resting near the safety. Minho leaned forward, his eyes bright with the anticipation of a messy ending. The guards stood as still as statues, their breath held in the frozen air of the foyer. Jae-hyun turned the gun over in his hand, then looked at Maya. She hadn't flinched. She didn't look at the steel in his hand. She looked at his eyes, waiting for the ghost to make a choice. Jae-hyun didn't raise the weapon. Instead, he dropped it into the thermal delivery bag sitting on the floor. The metal made a dull thud against the insulated fabric. She isn't a witness, Jae-hyun said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a new, heavy authority that made Minho's smile falter. She is an intentional guest. My guest. Minho's eyes widened. Guest? Jae-hyun, you're breaking 14 years of protocol for a delivery driver? The council will see this as a total collapse of your judgment. The protocol exists to protect the organization from threats, Jae-hyun replied, stepping closer to Minho. He didn't raise his voice, but the space between the two men became a vacuum of pressure. I have decided that Maya Carter is not a threat. She is a consultant. She found a mechanical failure in my service entrance that your security team missed for 6 months. He turned to the head guard. Update the biometric registry immediately. Maya Carter has level 5 access. If a single hair on her head is touched, it will be treated as an attack on my own person. Minho's face twisted. By naming her a guest and a consultant, Jae-hyun hadn't just spared her. He had tied her to the syndicate's inner circle. He had rewritten the rules of his empire in 10 seconds to save a woman who had called his life a cage. You're making a mistake, Minho hissed, realizing he had lost his leverage. You're letting a stranger into the vault. I'm opening a window, Jae-hyun said. He looked at Maya. The decision felt like a structural shift in the foundation of his tower. He had chosen a person over the system, and he knew the cost would be measured in more than just money. Maya watched him, her expression unreadable. She hadn't asked for a title or a key card. She had asked for $42. By making her untouchable, Jae-hyun had solved the immediate danger, but he had also placed a new kind of weight on her shoulders. Take the elevator to the lobby, Jae-hyun told her, his eyes lingering on the neon vest that seemed even brighter now. No one will stop you. And tomorrow you come back. We have a door that needs a permanent fix. Minho and his men retreated into the elevator, their silence heavy with a new kind of resentment. The doors slid shut, leaving Jae-hyun and Maya alone in the foyer once more. The room felt larger now, the shadows stretching across the marble as the digital clock moved deeper into the night. Jae-hyun walked to a small, hidden wall safe. He tapped a code into the glass. He didn't look at Maya while he worked. He pulled out a thick, white envelope. It was heavy, filled with the kind of untraceable cash that solved most problems in his world. He walked back to her and held it out. "There is enough in here to pay your utility bills for 10 years, Jae-hyun said. His voice was calm, returning to the transactional tone he used for everything. "Take it. It's for your silence. It's also for your safety. Move to a new apartment. Buy a car so you don't have to climb 50 flights of stairs for $42. He waited for the familiar reach. In his experience, everyone had a price, especially those who lived in the real world she spoke of. He expected her to grab the envelope, offer a quick nod of thanks, and disappear into the night before he could change his mind. Maya didn't reach for the money. She didn't even look at the envelope. She looked at the door he had left standing open, the one he had just claimed she had permission to walk through. "You're still doing it," she said. Jae-hyun's hand remained in the air. "Doing what? You think money fixes this?" Maya replied. She looked at him, her eyes tired but sharp. "You think if you give me enough paper, you can pretend this night didn't happen. You think you can go back to being a ghost, and I'll go back to being a ghost, and your system will be fixed." "It's a practical solution," Jae-hyun said, his fingers tightening on the paper. "It's an escape," she countered. She stepped closer, not as a guest or a consultant, but as a woman who had seen the man behind the monitors. "You broke your own rules tonight. You're scared of what that means for your empire, so you want to pay me to vanish, so you don't have to look at the crack in your wall every day." Jae-hyun lowered his hand. The weight of the envelope felt different now, clumsy and obvious. For the first time, his wealth felt like a language she didn't speak. He realized he wasn't just offering her money. He was pleading for his old life back. He was asking her to help him rebuild the cage. "If you don't take it," Jae-hyun murmured, "the shark will keep circling." "Then let him circle," Maya said. "I'm not running, Jae-hyun. And I'm not for sale." The envelope of cash lay on the cold marble table, untouched. Jae-hyun looked at it, then back at Maya. He had spent his life believing that every person had a price and every problem had a budget. For the first time, he was standing in front of a wall he couldn't buy his way through. Maya zipped her jacket. The neon fabric was duller now under the dim foyer lights, but her presence seemed to fill the room more than his own. She didn't look like a girl who had just turned down a small fortune. She looked like someone who had finally found the exit. "Keep your money, Jae-hyun," she said. Her voice was steady, lacking the sharp edge of her earlier anger. "You use it to build walls, and I have no interest in living inside them." Jae-hyun straightened his suit jacket, a reflex to regain the control that was slipping through his fingers. The offer wasn't just about money. It was about security. "You saw what happened with Minho. My world is not a place where people simply walk away." "Then stop being the center of it," Maya replied. She walked toward the elevator, her backpack shifting with every step. She stopped with her hand hovering over the call button, but she didn't press it. She turned back to face him. "You want me to be a consultant? You want me to come back tomorrow and fix your doors? Here are my terms." Jae-hyun waited. He was used to demands for percentages, territories, and power. "I won't come back to this tower," Maya said. "I won't be a secret you keep on the 50th floor. If you want to see me again, if you want to prove you aren't just a ghost in a suit, then you leave. You take the elevator down, you walk past your guards, and you meet me in the city, at a place where people don't have to scan their eyes to prove they exist." Jae-hyun felt a strange, hollow sensation in his chest. She was asking him to do the one thing he feared most, to be visible, to step out of the silence and into the noise. I can't guarantee your safety out there, he whispered. You can't even guarantee your own in here, she countered. Maya pressed the button. The elevator chimed, the sound echoing through the empty foyer like a bell. As the doors slid open, she stepped inside and turned around. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She simply watched him as the metal doors began to close. Jae-hyun stood alone in the center of his sanctuary. He looked at the monitors, the digital clocks, and the heavy velvet curtains. For years, he had believed this was where the power lived. But as he watched the floor numbers on the display begin to drop, 49, 48, 47, he finally understood the truth. The power wasn't in the one who owned the tower. It was in the one who was brave enough to walk out of it. He reached out and touched the glass of the monitor, watching her tiny figure emerge from the lobby and disappear into the night, leaving the ghost alone in his cage.